You know, that great line that Bobby has when he's speaking to Audrey is when talking about Ben Horn. He says, "Your old man has just bought a condo in Flip City."
One take, one take, one take, one take.
Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our discussions of this great series, which is known as Twin Peaks. And right now, I'd like to focus our attention today on episode 20. So as you may know, we have been going through each of the episodes, episode by episode, and now we come to episode 20. And so I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on the events leading up to and including such episode 20, not necessarily focusing on anything beyond this directly, but let us focus our attention and energies on everything up to and including episode 20. With, of course, the understanding that there are more subsequent episodes and events to occur beyond. But that's part of the fun. That's part of the great joy that is exploring the world of Twin Peaks, is it not? And also, I should say that in my exploration of Twin Peaks, I do not at all hold myself out to be in any way an expert when it comes to this world. So I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. I'm going to maybe make some, maybe forget to say some things that will be, of course, very significant going forward. So I, of course, apologize in advance. But be that as it may, I am also a big fan of this show. And I've seen it many times, many times. And I've enjoyed it every single time. And so from that perspective, let me now share with you some of my comments about this show, specifically episode 20. And so with that, we have, of course, the revelation or the picking up of the cliffhanger thread regarding Major Briggs. And now we have this very interesting, almost bizarre, hallucinatory or vision type of situation where he's sitting on a chair or a throne or some kind of seat, surrounded by some kind of mixture of stone and foliage of some sort with light shining, as he is seemingly explaining what it was that he was encountering when he disappeared. That's the assumption. And then we cut right back to him being interrogated in the sheriff's station. So we have this very interesting situation involving, again, dream and vision. And if we recall from past episodes, we remember that Major Briggs has many things occupying his mind, and one of the things he makes a distinction of is the idea of dreams versus vision. So here we have something that is either dream or vision-like, again, based on one's own interpretation. But this conversation then turns into some more interesting backstory. There is the mention of Project Blue Book, and so the idea of the study of UFOs. And this study and this exploration seems to have been ongoing even in an unofficial capacity. So this seems to be very much something that Dale Cooper apparently is aware of as well. So this would make sense in the context of the exploration of outer space that was part of what Major Briggs had relayed to Cooper in a past episode, and the messages. And of course, Colonel Riley made the clarification about the source of such messages, not coming from outer space, but according to him, coming from somewhere in the woods. So indeed, right, the owls are not what they seem. And indeed, also, I neglected to mention too, the imagery involving the owls and the emergence of these, the presence of the owls, for instance, around the time of the disappearance of Major Briggs, and then, of course, beyond, and of course, prior to that as well. Owls are very significant in the world of Twin Peaks. Let's see, there's also the, in addition to Project Blue Book, we also have, again, the point where Major Briggs is about to say something about this thing that has been mentioned recently called the White Lodge, but then at the precise moment when he's about to reveal all, again, just like when he was about to say something at the nighttime camping excursion that he had with Cooper before he disappeared. And of course, we have Colonel Riley's men coming in to escort him out. So there isn't any clarification from Major Briggs about what the White Lodge is as of this time. But again, let's keep this in mind. This seems to be something that is very, very, very important, or at least gaining in significance as we go on. And we should also remember, too, there was something that was mentioned by Hawk in a previous episode called the Black Lodge. So let's perhaps keep these in mind. And again, too, the associations with colors. Project Blue Book, Black Lodge, White Lodge. So again, this is something that we've seen in Twin Peaks time and time again, and perhaps we will continue to see it as we progress through this great series. So, however, we also have the continuing saga of Andy and Dick Tremaine and Nikki, Happy Helping Hand Adoption Agency, and the mystery surrounding Nikki. What were the circumstances that caused these, again, mystery? What were these circumstances caused that relate to the background of Nikki? And so they have this plot that is hatched to go and to try to find the records in terms of the Nikki's background, and to see if he is indeed perhaps a devilish boy, as they might suspect from previous episodes. This, of course, brings them to the Dorrit Home for Boys, and to try to find out the file on Nikki, and they encounter the Brunstons and some dialogue about Donnie and the like. So very interesting dilemma and a very interesting situation that's being set up. Again, what is the background surrounding Nikki? What is his significance in terms of the saga of Dick Tremaine and Andy, and of course how that will play into and factor into their relationship with Lucy and children, and what is the mysterious circumstances that surround the background of Nikki? Will these important questions be resolved or not? Again, we shall have to wait and see. And what do the Brunstons and Donnie have to do with anything going forward? They may or may not have something to do with this continuing saga. Again, something that we shall also see as well. But now, with respect to this episode, I should also point out that one of the things I think we can say about the maybe a theme of this episode 20, is that I think we see a number of couples coming together, and a number of couples that are reuniting in many ways. I guess before we get to that, I should point out too that we also see some breakups, but at the same time we see some breakups, we see people coming together. I think one of the relationships that's perhaps under a certain degree of tension, at least when compared to earlier episodes, is that between Bobby and Shelley. They've always been in love. They've always been very much into each other. But now, with respect to taking care of Leo, Bobby seems to be uninterested to the point of basically leaving the house, leaving Shelley behind to take care of things. Shelley slaps him across the face, and they yell at each other. They have a fight, and then Bobby leaves. Because, of course, now Bobby has his sights set on the Horns and the Horn Empire, and indeed his interactions with Audrey, his interactions with Ben Horn. You know, that great line that Bobby has when he's speaking to Audrey is, when talking about Ben Horn, he says, "Your old man has just bought a condo in Flip City." So I really found that to be a fascinating line. So yes, so indeed, this is of course describing the aspect of Ben Horn and his continuing, state of mind and state of being with regard to the Civil War, not just the figures, not just the play acting, but also indeed, yes, perhaps inhabiting the role, or beginning to inhabit the role, to the point that, in fact, Audrey is becoming quite concerned. And so Audrey asks Jerry to come back, and also asks for the assistance of Dr. Jacoby. And she announces that these characters might return very soon. So we shall have to wait perhaps for future episodes until we see them return, and maybe that might have something to contribute to what might hopefully be, at least from Audrey's perspective, some kind of therapy for her father, Ben Horn. But in any event, yes, this continuing saga of Ben Horn and his continuing state with regard to the Civil War, the American Civil War, is indeed very fascinating. Now, going back to the comment that I was making earlier about this episode being about couples coming back together after being driven apart. for through whatever circumstance. One of such couples is indeed that of Ben Horne and Catherine. So, as we know from many an episode, ever since almost the start of the series, we've seen this intimate relationship between Catherine and Ben, which had a lot of twists and turns, a lot of betrayal and backstabbing. And now we see Catherine return to Ben at the Great Northern, and she's very upfront. She says, "You know, you betrayed me. You tried to have me killed." But despite that, she goes back to him and they embrace. And so, what does this mean going forward regarding Catherine and Ben? We're not sure. It is a very interesting set of circumstances, to say the least. But in any event, this is one couple that we see come back together in this episode. So, very interesting indeed. Another couple we could see coming back together in a manner of speaking to is Sheriff Truman and Josie. Now, Josie has returned, but now she's working as the servant of Catherine and by extension Pete. And so Sheriff Truman visits and he urges her to escape to get out of there, but it's a little bit more difficult than meets the eye, and Josie seems to express that difficulty, although they do share an embrace and a very intimate kiss and situation about that. So in this way too, we can say that this is either a coming together, or maybe to put it a better way, a reaffirmation of their union, of their relationship, that of Sheriff Truman and Josie. So, but that's something that we shall see develop going forward. At least if there are any developments, let's point them out when we can, again, when we discuss future episodes. But for now, that's another of the couples. Yet another couple we can see maybe coming together, or the potential of coming together, is that of Nadine and Mike. Right, Nadine is really into Mike, and Mike, I'm not sure, is reciprocating such feelings. Although there's a moment in the diner when Nadine is very aggressive, she's very forthright when it comes to her feelings. One of the great things about Nadine, I think I admire Nadine so much, is that she is so persistent, and she has a strong belief and confidence, if anything. And so I think that confidence and strong belief takes her very far. And she is unwilling to take no for an answer at first. She's very persistent. I admire that very much. And we kind of support her, and we are with her, especially with her encounter with Hank a little bit later, when Hank is attacking Ed in the house. Norma appears, I mean, Hank appears out of nowhere, and then Norma seems to appear out of nowhere. She appears at the door, and then suddenly there's this fight, and Norma, with her superhuman strength, she comes to the rescue and attacks Hank and protects Ed from Hank's attack on him. So I think this is an episode where, at least for me, I am rooting for Nadine all the more. And so it's great to see that continuing potential relationship, shall we say, between her and Mike. So that's another couple, or potential couple, shall I say. Now, I mentioned Ed. One of the great couples, or non-couples, as the case might be, is that relationship between Norma and Ed. We got to talk, he says. And this means that she is going over to his house. They're alone, and they share an intimate moment, a very intimate moment together. And so I love this moment too, because they express their love and devotion. And Norma says that she is always thinking of him. The last thing that she thinks of before she goes to sleep is him, and the first thing that she thinks of when she wakes up. I mean, it's a very romantic affirmation of their love for each other. And they are it's a tragic relationship, because they love each other and yet they can't be together. And here they are together. And it is also a sense of maybe there might be some future in this relationship. Who knows? Who knows? But it looks like there is some kind of wheels that are turning that seem to be moving towards perhaps a resolution of some kind, which might see Ed and Norma together. We don't know yet, of course, because there's still Ed and Nadine. There's also Hank as well, and we see Hank a little bit later in the house itself. How he got into the house, I don't know. That's one of the great talents of Hank, perhaps. But in any event, yes, there might be some trajectory towards maybe seeing Ed and Norma together. We don't know. But for right now, this component of the episode is very romantic indeed. Very, very romantic. So that's another couple. And yet another couple that seems to be coming together is James and Evelyn. And James and Evelyn, the saga of James and Evelyn, what's going to happen here? James, of course, wants to get all his money out of his savings account. I love that revelation about how much is in a savings account from the telephone call. We assume is from Ed, $12. But yes, still $12 is better than zero. And so now we have James repairing the automobiles for Evelyn. And Evelyn to further revealing that there's not just tension and antagonism between her and her husband, but also domestic violence is assumed, which is a very intense and very unpleasant set of circumstances, to say the least. And so this leads to James and Evelyn furthering their, say, mutual attraction. But I put that in quotes because now we also understand, too, that there is something on the side, something hidden in terms of this character, Malcolm and Evelyn. The brother, or maybe not the brother as we see it, because they too share, he and Evelyn share an embrace as well. So this is coming at all sides in terms of couples that are coming together or that are reconfirming their relationship. And so we have not just James and Evelyn, but also James and Evelyn, but also Evelyn and Malcolm. And so we'll see what goes on here. So there is a lot of intrigue, a lot of mystery going forward. And two, we have what other couples there? Oh yes, of course, we have the couple that is Shelley and Leo. Now, one of the aspects of this episode too is that this episode could also be described as a horror episode, a horror story. And one of the horror elements that comes up is towards the end when Leo comes back with the stuff on his face and that look of sheer horror. And Shelley is all alone. And this whole thing about their house with the plastic, and it's always in a state of construction, it adds to the eeriness and to Shelley's total vulnerability at the moment. And also the lights going out, because we understand too there's some light failure, power failure, explosions that Lucy refers to a little bit later in terms of that. So the horror elements are I think, amplified to the max. One of which is this scene of reemergence of Leo. So here's another couple, in a manner of speaking, coming together, that of Leo and Shelley Johnson. But I'm not sure if that's going to be any good news for Shelley. And if anything, this is a really horrific situation. And we'll have to wait and see if at all, if she's able to escape this or not. But we shall have to wait and see. So those are the couples coming together. I should point out, too, that another aspect of the episode that I think is really fascinating is the references back to what might be said to be the earlier part of the episode of the series Twin Peaks. Now, what I mean by this is Twin Peaks has always been, or the start of Twin Peaks has been, who killed Laura Palmer, right? And the whole mystery of who killed Laura Palmer brings the people together. Dale Cooper, at the time Special Agent Dale Cooper, and now he is still in suspension, although he's deputized here for this episode, and we'll get to that momentarily. But the point I wanted to bring up is the first half of this series, Twin Peaks, leading up to, say, around episode 14 or 15 or so, has always been at its focus who killed Laura Palmer, and the things about the Palmers and Bob and Mike and the other mysteries surrounding that. But after the resolution as to the killing of Laura Palmer and the death of Leland Palmer, we get this aspect of the series where we go into slightly different territory, where we haven't heard about Bob lately, or we haven't heard about Mike, or we haven't heard about Laura Palmer or Leland Palmer or Sarah Palmer. Except now we get some references in this episode back to the early part of this TV series Twin Peaks. So, for example, James mentions to Evelyn something about Twin Peaks, about a girl that he was in love with named Laura, who died. And so this is, of course, reminding us of the central mystery of Twin Peaks, who killed Laura Palmer, and the donut hole, one of the great donut holes in anything, in any kind of modern day fiction entertainment, that being Laura Palmer. Her absence, non-absence, is in many ways the key to the success of this series. So the reminding us of Laura and mentioning Laura, this is a very important callback to the earlier part of the series. Also, there is a shot of Andy pointing his gun. This is with the stakeout, or this is the final confrontation between the police and Jean Renault and others. So this is the final kind of a confrontation, right? In terms of the drug deal and the drug bust, and Denise Bryson, or Dennis Bryson, as the case may be, and Ernie and King, and then of course Jean Renault and Cooper there, who's held hostage, but we'll get to that momentarily. But Andy's holding his gun. So if you remember from the earlier part of the series, there's this whole thing about Andy dropping his gun and not being good with firearms, but then suddenly he is training, and he actually comes to the rescue when it's most needed in terms of his firearm skills. So chin up Andy, if you remember. So that's one aspect that's also could be said to be a callback to the earlier part of the show. And also there is a scene with Shelley and Bobby and Leo in the house, and you can hear in the background uh, Invitation to Love, the soap opera that was always on during the first part of the show. So it's great to see a callback back to Invitation to Love, which is then reminding us of the earlier part of Twin Peaks. So there is a lot to be said about maybe the latter half of the show versus the earlier part of the show. And for all intents and purposes, what we can say that we are in the latter half of the show. And it may have its fans, it may have its detractors, of course, but we are still in the world of Twin Peaks, and we are still in this environment with these characters. And that being said, it's always nice to get these callbacks to earlier episodes, like we do in a kind of omnibus way here in this episode. But now, we have, with all these elements going on, I think we should also mention too the return of Jean Renault and the whole confrontation and resolution of the drug angle to Dale Cooper, and to his plight, and also Denise Bryson, DEA agent, who is now Dennis Bryson for a certain part of this episode, in terms of pretending to be the buyer, because the whole thing is that Jean Renault is trying to use Hank and Ernie to sell the drugs for a profit, $125K, I think that's the price. And so Ernie is now working for the authorities, and so they're trying to wire him up, but he's sweating a lot, so Hawk's having some difficulty. But then Denise Bryson, but now Dennis Bryson, will play the role of the buyer. And so this is the whole setup that they hope to have in order to bring down the whole network of illicit drug substances. And so this goes to Dead Dog Farm again, which we saw before, and the situation involving the discovery of the plan, the plot, to sort of to try to bring them down. Cooper, of course, being the very heroic man that he is, decides to bring himself forward in order to say, I will be your hostage instead. And so he decides to give himself up and put himself in the custody, the very dangerous situation of being with Jean Renault and King and others. So he is now being held hostage in the house, Dead Dog Farm. And so this leads to the nighttime scene, the final confrontation between the authorities outside and the quote-unquote bad guys on the inside. And we have a number of things that are interesting here. So first of all, we have Denise Bryson then coming to the door, and Denise Bryson, of course, is relying on the possibility that the people inside will not take her seriously. And so they will put their guard down. But in fact, that's what Denise Bryson is and others are counting on. And that's the trick. And indeed, it works, because Cooper is able to take the gun and save the day, as it were. And this is the end of this plot. And this is the end of Jean Renault. But before Jean Renault is killed, of course, he has that great moment, that very chilling moment where he's talking to Cooper. And it's a kind of final acknowledgement of why he is against Cooper. This idea of course, avenging the deaths of his brothers, Bernard and Jacques Renault. Although, of course, we know that Cooper wasn't involved directly in their deaths. If you remember, Bernard, the assumption was he was killed by Leo, and Jacques Renault, we know, was killed by Leland Palmer in the hospital. So Cooper wasn't responsible directly for their deaths, but here is the theory of the case that maybe, according to Jean Renault, maybe when Cooper came to Twin Peaks, he was bringing the nightmare with him. And so maybe, according to Jean Renault, if he kills Cooper, then the nightmare will go away. This is a very intriguing concept, and this idea of Cooper being a good guy has always been part of the dynamic that makes Cooper such an appealing and famous and very popular character. But also, there's a notion that maybe he's bringing some darkness, or he's bringing the nightmare as well. Now, this is intriguing because it might have something to do a little bit, either directly or indirectly, with the stuff that happened in Pittsburgh. Again, we don't know exactly what went down. We have mentions of it and we have little bits of information, but we don't have yet a clear picture, I would say. Maybe it's something to do with some kind of weakness or some kind of negative aspect to Cooper's personality or character. We're not sure. But he does seem to refer to it as a type of weakness when he's speaking to Diane, for instance, in some previous episodes. We shall have to wait and see. Also, it does remind us, too, of Hawke's description of the Black Lodge, the shadow self, the mirror image, the shadow image, also the idea of the annihilation of the soul, and Major Briggs's idea of fear, confrontation over fear, etc. So this is, of course, setting up a type of duality. And so maybe this idea of Cooper bringing the nightmare is setting up also in a nuanced way the duality of Cooper. Cooper being, quote unquote, a good guy, and also maybe the potential of Cooper being not such a good guy. So we shall have to wait and see if Jean Renault's theory of the case holds water or not, but we shall have to wait and see. Incidentally, too, I should point out that speaking of water, I forgot to say that there was a splash of water on the picture early on the episode in the sheriff's office when Major Briggs is being interrogated, and of course there's that idea of the marks on his neck, the triangular marks on his neck. Doc Hayward is there as well. So we have and so the Sprinkler, of course, is also reminding us of what happened with Bob and Leland during the final stages before Leland died. So there's another callback to the earlier part of Twin Peaks, the sprinkler system. Thank goodness Dick Tremaine wasn't there, or at least as he said it elsewhere, he quit smoking. So at least he wasn't there to set off the fire sprinkler system again. But yes. Oh, and also I should mention too that speaking of the saga of James, Donna is still here. So I mentioned the reunion of couples. Maybe Donna will try to get to James. Of course, Ed knows where James is because James called him on Route 96 with trying to meet him there, and so he gives that information. Ed does to Donna. So we shall see what Donna does. Will she go out and try to find James or not? Again, we shall see. So yes, I think with this episode, there is a lot to be said. There is a lot to be said about the callbacks to the earlier part of the series. There's also a lot to be said about coming together and unions and reunions and reaffirmations of couples and relationship dynamics. And also I mentioned the horror film aspect. Now I should end with the ending of this series, or the ending of this episode, which is the very creepy shot of the body and the being tied up in the chair with the chessboard and the finger pointing to a particular move. We understand this is a sign or a message from Wyndham Earle. And there's this whole thing about bombs being set off in fires and the power going out and all this mystery surrounding that. And then there's the discovery of this by Cooper and others. A very eerie scene. So it looks like the danger and maybe what Wyndham Earle is representing in the chess, this is actually becoming more intensified. And this is also a horror and horrific aspect, again, linking to this idea of the episode as also being a type of horror episode, the return of Leo and the grisly discovery of this body in the chessboard. What's going to happen next? We are on the edges of our seats, are we not? Okay, my dear friends, so that's it in a nutshell for this episode. Let us continue on with our discussions going forward. But until we meet each other again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great TV shows like Twin Peaks, my dear friends, like Twin Peaks. Okay, so until we see each other at the next one, Thank you and cheers.